obviously the demands to help more the working people, because the support is not enough, and also in many ways it's like I said, anti-labor.
Okay, thank you. I have to apologize those who wanted to follow us on live stream. We had some technical problems there, but according to the information I just got, that's solved now. So welcome also to everybody who is following us today on the live stream. We just jumped into the topic with Marta Tycner from Poland, Bence Tortai from Hungary. And Marta just explained us more or less that the Polish government had a very mixed approach towards dealing with the corona crisis. Most of its programs apparently favored businesses, but still so far the only group who managed to voice some protests against the government's handling of the crisis were the businessmen, whereas working class people apparently don't fare so well, but are also not finding the way to express their voice yet publicly. Before we go on to Bence, just a quick word. If you are in the Zoom following us, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It's also nice to see who is here, who is following us. And then feel free to comment anything we are saying here in the chat. And there is a Q&A tool in Zoom where you can ask questions, which we can then discuss later. So feel free to use that. Bence, we know you are in a special situation because there is a law that forbids you to share fake news with us. So please just tell us the truth and nothing but the truth. How is it to experience this crisis in Hungary these days?
Yeah, hello everyone. It's really an interesting situation, but not concerning the tackling the health crisis, because I would say it's very typical. In Hungary, we have the same measures more or less than in all the other European countries, with smaller differences, but the way as they handle the economic crisis, it's very, very interesting. I think I have to quote Viktor Orban, who said, the goal is to create as many jobs as are destroyed by the virus. So they really don't want to help people with something like unemployment assistance, or especially with a basic income, an emergency basic income, or any other tools like that. But they subsidize the capitalists within a framework of crony capitalism. It is widely known that Hungary is a hybrid regime. It's semi-authoritarian, but in the economic field, it's a hardliner neoliberal government combined with this crony capitalist attitude. So they use all the opportunities to expand their economic power through their oligarchs. And what we see now is that, for example, they give a lot of investment aid or cheap loans or guarantees, equity injections, and so on to their partners, to their familiars and oligarchs. So instead of helping the people in this crisis, they help their friends in the economy.
So if you are not a friend of Viktor Orban or a friend of Viktor Orban, how are your how is your situation these days in Hungary? What is your situation if you are just a normal entrepreneur? What is your situation if you are have been working for a company that run out of business?
Okay, I try to show their best measures and steps. For example, what would be very important, this Kurzarbeit program, the Hungarian version is a very strict one, and it affects less than 3% of the employees with an average support of less than 500 euros per month. They have it was, I think, in the some report sent to the EU that 0.37% of GDP will be sent for this Kurzarbeit program and similar programs, which would be the most important step, I would think. But they communicate very boldly. They state that this is a historical economic boosting package with 20% of the GDP, which is fake news completely. Or
but
if
nobody has been put in jail for that yet, I guess.
Not yet, but a few people were abused by police officers, so it's not so funny. They just posted on Facebook, and they met some guys in blue in front of their doors early in the morning. So it works in a way.
Is there? Do you sense some climate of fear or so? I mean, we know that in Hungary, the more unfortunate part of the population isn't really well organized politically anyway, and the whole structure of the Orbán government is about vertical dependencies. So that's nothing new, but has the crisis changed that? So also with this new law on fake news, and so is it even more difficult, or doesn't make this a difference?
It's difficult to evaluate the effects of these moves. I wouldn't speak about fear, rather apathy in a way. People are more focused on their own lives, and we have only one series of demonstrations, also by car, and it was the so-called honking demonstrations, and those who took part in those were penalized to hundreds of thousands forints, and probably it doesn't make the people eager to be involved in social or political activism.
Marta, what is the situation in Poland? The big difference is you have a presidential election going on. You have probably still a little bit more press freedom than what is left over in Hungary. In what respect does the crisis influence also the discussions in the presidential elections? And does it also have some social policy aspects? So are questions of social policy also part of the discussions in the presidential elections?
They obviously are, yes. But again, this is the background. This is something that is like not what you actually see in the first place. So, for example, for the past 3 days or something like this, we have we've had another wave of the anti-LGBT campaign. It started with a charter for families or something like this, presented by the current president, who is running for his second term, and it's a like anti same-sex, well, not only marriages, but any sort of protection of families, right? We know it in Hungary too. It's like the comes back all the time, and so this is the direction they're going in the presidential campaign right now. This is what they're how they're steering. I mean, this comes from the government, right? And the opposition is like just answering these whatever the topics are. This is of course a way to deflect the debate from other topics, like corruption scandals around the minister of health, for example, and also the general economic situation. But again, it's like, for me personally, it's just absolutely amazing how we have this debate, what we had before, like debates that are like about other issues, not the social economic issues, like dominate the entire spectrum of what we actually discuss, even in this pandemic situation we are having right now. So even now, it's possible to do it. And obviously, the another aspect is that the case before, the main opposition party, the Civic Platform, and their candidate, the current mayor of Warsaw, who is polling not bad really, but this camp doesn't have any proposal or vision for the country, pandemic or no pandemic, right? They just don't know what they want. They want to get rid of the government. This is all they want, basically. And if they're like pushed to say something, they go. They normally go to austerity programs and stuff like this. Of course, it's getting less and less so, because the times are changing, so to say. But it's not that they can propose anything like more pro-social that the government can. So the government beats them easily in this area.
Mm. When we look at the public debate, of course, for us as basic income advocates, it's also an interesting question how the discussion on social policies is shifting. So in our idea, obviously the state should support people on an individual basis without means testing in a universal approach. So these help should be there, support should be there for everyone. And in many countries, we have noticed such shifts. So not an introduction of basic income, even not in Spain, despite of the news. But we have seen in many countries that it has been made easier for people to apply for support without proving all the lengthy, without going through all the lengthy procedures they had to do before, or for businesses to get unbureaucratic aid. Has that been also the case in Poland, in Hungary? Has that been demanded by somebody? So if the government has not done that, has that still been part of the public debate in some respect?
In Poland, yes. A little bit. It moves in this direction. So, like I said in the beginning, we already have four for rescue programs, and in all like every month we have a rescue program, a new one, and in each of them there is some sort of unbureaucratic or support or with very limited bureaucracy involved. And some of these, there are elements of where you can say, yes, this is going in this direction, right? For example, right now there will be like there is this like the most famous law and justice social program is the Kindergeld, so the money for kids. And it's unconditional. It's basically an unconditional basic income for kids. And now they want to top up this payment with an extra payment for holidays, for example. It was supposed to be something different in the beginning. Doesn't matter, but they like continue this. There is like a one-off support for small businesses who had to shut down. So yes, there is this, but and there was also like a very briefly and also limited to some circles, but there was a debate for like a couple of weeks maybe around like, shall we go towards universal basic income? Like some people got very excited, obviously not the government, right? But like on the left, it's like it's this topic was revived and discussed again. So yeah, so the shift is there. I can't say, but I imagine it's different. I mean, I don't know much about Hungary, but I've noticed that our two countries are always like quoted together, like Hungary and Poland this, Hungary and Poland that, whereas the economic policies the two governments have are really different. So I'm curious actually to learn what's happening in Hungary.
So Bence, is Hungary about introducing basic income or not yet?
Not at all. We can't see such a shift. First of all, you have to know that the Hungarian unemployment allowance scheme is the strictest in the European Union. The maximum time of this assistance is 3 months. It used to be 9, but PiS-government changed it, and the maximum amount is at the level of the minimum wage. And after that, you have to you have an obligation to go to a public employment program where the wage is half of the minimum wage, or you will lose all of your social rights, and only 1/3 of the unemployment people gets unemployment assistance. That's the consequence. So we begin from very far from the idea of basic income. That's why it is very powerful to challenge this attitude with our emergency basic income program or proposal, and which says everyone should give at least 100,000 forints a month, which is more or less 300 euros. For children, half of it, and which is surprising that not just our party, Dialogue for Hungary, which is not a green liberal but a green left party, but also sorry for that correction, but also centrist liberal parties like Momentum, for example, which is a member of Renew Europe. So they also support such a solution. And that's a new challenge, because we just had a fresh poll result which says 80% of Hungarian people would support a basic income scheme. So Orbán and all the government has now really tough opposition to fight with, finally. So they have a strong narrative, this work-based society, but I wouldn't think that it's very popular amongst the people.
I guess it's a little bit difficult to keep up this argument that if you have no job, it's your own fault because you don't try hard enough, when due to the virus, hundreds of thousands are losing their jobs.
Yeah, the problem is we don't have reliable statistical data because the Central Statistical Office is totally controlled politically by the government, and we just can have estimations from different sources, from public opinion polls, which states that about 7% of the employees lost their jobs in the past few months, which is pretty tough. But the official numbers are much lower than this.
Mm.
It's actually similar, if I may. It's actually very similar in Poland. I mean, I was talking about these support programs and so on, and they do exist. But in terms of the situation of the working people, it's pretty similar. I mean, it's this social turn that Law and Justice took 5 years ago. It was really just a tiny correction of what we have. And for example, people in Poland don't register as unemployed because it makes absolutely no sense to do it. There is the unemployment benefit used to be 150 euros, and it was for 3 months, and then 3 months more, so even less. And you were obliged to, like, again, be part of their programs and so on, and you couldn't work on the black market, for example, during this time. And only 15% of people are actually entitled to any benefit. So the unemployment support is non-existent. Is just non-existent, and the outcome is that right now, when we know that basically everybody's situation at work changed somehow, like literally every worker had to undergo some change in the way they work. We just don't know what these changes are. I saw a report saying that only 20% of those who actually lost their jobs now during this crisis registered, but it's just an estimation. Again, we don't know. There is an estimation that on average people work 4.5 hours less than they used to, but again, it's an estimation. Like I said, some of the programs which go in different directions actually encourage companies to pay people less, even if they have no problems at all. And companies like this exist, and they just, lower wages or cut hours, or officially, but unofficially you work at the same time and so on. So the pressure on the working class is huge, and there is no resistance. There is no way to resist it right now. So it's
what do people do when they lose their jobs? We've just heard that the state support is not really something they can rely on. How do you survive?
It's private strategies all over. I mean, again, this is just my guess because we don't know enough, but the way people react, they just withdraw to family support network, maybe friends and so on, and they just deal with it privately, like they're like used to it since the 90s at least, right? You're on your own. You just go with your whatever brother-in-law and you do something new. or you try to figure out what to do, or you start some black market activity or whatever. Or it's very interesting to see, like, if I may just two brief examples from my own observations. One is I'm moving houses, so I rely on deliveries and stuff like this, and I can see how literally overnight you have deliveries with no registration coming. So there is like a demand for deliveries, like, and people with cars just start delivering you stuff, and you just pay them cash, and that's it. And another interesting thing is that schools reopened and kindergartens reopened, but it's not obligatory to put to send your kids there, and only up to the age of 10. And right now, the number of kids who are back to school is, in at least in big cities where I saw the statistics, below 10%, which means that it's amazing, right? Because the first thing that people saw when the crisis came was like, oh my God, kids are at home. Like, what do we do with the kids? How do we work with the kids? And then 3 months later, it turned out that the private support network, like people who can support you and help you, it started working, and somehow you just can do it. I don't know how. I mean, I know how, because I sent my kid to school, but only because I wanted. I could manage, right? I already developed a way of doing it, and here we are. We're like outside of the state, back to the private life.
Is that something, Bence, we also can observe in Hungary? So we had in the socialist time this notorious informal economy, which basically complemented for everything that the official economy was not able to provide for. Is that also where we are heading back to in Hungary?
Well, it's difficult to tell you, because we have just sporadic informations from poorer countries or regions or villages where all those people live who really suffer under this crisis. We have some articles. Yes, we politicians or activists talk to some people there, but we don't have the big the big picture. There is and during this situation, we have a very cynical political campaign which says no Hungarian is left alone, which is obviously a huge lie. And still, you can see the videos on the Facebook, and TV, on billboards. It's funded from, of course, government sources, billions of forints, and it's somehow. So the reality and that picture what they try to show up is so super different that I have no words for that. We don't really have good sources of information because all the state offices and part of the media, of course, is controlled politically, and it's hard to tell. Probably in Budapest the situation is not that tough, but in smaller villages I have no idea how they survive, really.
Okay, we can we are starting to get a few questions from the audience also. I would again encourage everybody, where you're in the Zoom webinar or you are following us live, send us your questions. Peter is asking, vast majority of the people in Czech Republic believes the pandemic is over, despite all the available information, likely because of the possible economic consequences of acknowledging the full extent of the situation. Is that similar in Poland and in Hungary, I would like to add? Is there a push that is something we here in Germany also feel, that people really dislike the measures, the lockdown measures, and want to basically talk their way out of the crisis?
I think so, yes. But on top of that, there is a gradual dismantling of the health measures, of the safety measures, and the numbers are going up. The numbers of cases are going up, but there is, it's not only economical, but also political reasons that there will be no closure right now, because until the 28th of June, the government will have to show that the situation is under control and the election can take place, or even until if there is a second round, and it's quite probable there is going to be a second round, so until the 6th, I believe, of July. And it's difficult, of course, but it's difficult to survive, like we all know, right? To survive in the lockdown. But and it's like I think I wouldn't be too judgmental about people who want to just come back to their lives. But on the other hand, it is a bit scary, because in Poland we had like a very quick closure of everything. I think the government, my impression was the government was like, maybe we can just not have it in Poland if we close quick enough. And they really started very early. And also with these like slight authoritarian tendencies, like close something, it's nice, no? And so they used the opportunity. So the numbers were low, but they never fell. They were stable over weeks. And then the opening started and the numbers went up. So actually it feels like as if the wave of cases is only coming, and we are just in the beginning. And interestingly or sadly, the most of the cases right now are in the mines, in hard coal mines in Silesia. So yeah, and because for economic reasons, they were not closed, right? They're closed now, but they were not.
Enter, how was that?
Well, that's interesting, because sometimes it seems that the government overreacts the virus situation in a way in some of their steps, but at the same time they monitor the public opinion every day. They do a poll and try to find out what is the desire of the people, and that's how you got free parking in Budapest as a virus. Maybe it's a bit different. It's part of a political game, but they react very sensibly. They are good populists in this sense, and they feel that most of the people would like to go back to normal, which is totally understandable. And in the last weeks, the feeling on being threatening, it's not that strong, I would say, and most of the interest goes to the same direction, and probably the loosening of these measures is on the table, but they can't let it totally going our way, because most of the experts says that we have to prepare to a second wave, so they somehow try to keep up this state of not emergency but some kind of special state legally and in healthcare, but in other fields of life probably things will be normal soon. Yeah.
One of the areas which I'm also interested to hear about, of course, we have these quite unpleasant national governments in both countries, but at the same time, in Hungary, especially since the last autumn, in Poland, probably a little bit longer, we also have opposition parties in power in municipalities. So, Bence, you were very modest about the size of your party before, but as it happens, the mayor of Budapest is also a member of your party. You have mayors and vice mayors in districts of Budapest. There are other towns in the countryside run by the opposition. In Poland, I think the situation is very similar. So you just said, mentioned the presidential candidate of the opposition is also the mayor of Warsaw, a city of similar size to Budapest. How is it, how can these politicians, how can these municipalities do something in this situation? Have they been able to help people in a way that the government was not ready to?
Can I begin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a good news for UBI fans that the mayor of Budapest is also pro-UBI, and we have a two-level local authority regime in Budapest. We have mayors in district and we have a Lord Mayor. And the social issues is under control of the districts. And there's only one district in Budapest, which is led by a politician from Párbeszéd Dialogue for Hungary. This is the first district led by Marta Tycner, and they imposed an emergency basic income. They just put our model into reality. It lasts for 3 months. It's really an emergency measure as the local authorities has very limited means. Still, this is the first time that serious basic income program came into force in Hungary.
Well, that's great to hear. I didn't know that, actually. It's really great news, and I'm afraid I cannot say anything like this. I have no such news from Poland. So we don't have, well, opposition mayors. Yes, we have mayors from opposition parties or independent mayors. It also, they're also quite a thing, right? But there is literally no like progressive mayor, right? So they are all more or less centrists or center-right politicians. So, for example, the mayor of Warsaw leads a very, very conservative in terms of like very, very like non-audacious local policy, and very pro-business, very I will not touch too much and just build a road somewhere kind of local policy. So it's not really spectacular, I would say, in any way. And what can I say? No, nothing's happening like this here. It's a shame, but no.
One more area I would like to look at is obviously the healthcare sector, or broader, the whole care sector is got very much in the focus during the whole crisis. And I know it from Hungary. I assume it's not very different in Poland, that the healthcare sector has been run down during various neoliberal governments, not investing enough, and also with lots of skilled people leaving to Western Europe to work there instead. So how have you observed, has the healthcare sector performed in this situation? How much did these problems became more visible? How much effect did they have on the handling of the pandemic?
Well, it was awful here. It was awful. So first of all, immediately what happened, the care homes and hospitals became focal points of the pandemic, because mainly because nurses work in many places at once to make their living. The healthcare sector here is in a disastrous shape. So, for example, the average age of Polish nurses is around the retirement age. So we have older nurses after the retirement age and slightly younger, and virtually no younger people coming to the job. There were protests of nurses before the pandemic. There were protests of young doctors before the pandemic. They were smashed by law and justice recklessly, with smear campaign, awful. And right now, even though when it first happened, right, everybody was like, oh, our heroes, the doctors, the nurses, we have to clap from balconies like everywhere in Europe and so on. And there were more interest, and there were more like, oh, we have to do something with the health sector and so on. But in fact, nothing is really proposed. No, but the things that are proposed are, for example, there is a proposal for an easier way to privatize hospitals. It's now easier. There is an extension of working hours for like the pretext for this was exactly this: the health sector, right? They have to work long hours because we need them, blah blah blah. So the maximum working hours per day were extended to 12, but for the entire working force. So basically, the working the labor movement lost one of the most important wins in this century, right, with this legislation. So this is really outrageous what's happening with this with the health sector, and how you can just ignore how absolutely disastrous it is right now there, and do nothing instead of the health situation right now.
Has that been part of the public debate to some extent? this situation?
To some extent, yes, of course. But I must say that the health sector as such, and the debate about the health sector was like the first 6 weeks maybe of the lockdown. It was there. And then because we saw that it's like sort of under control, that there is no Italian scenario happening right now, other topics won in the public visibility.
How was this in Hungary, then, sir?
The situation in the healthcare system is very similar than the one in Poland, which is special that we don't have a ministry for healthcare. We just have a state secretary, and the minister is totally incompetent. Is so obviously done what they have made. The most problematic step was that they wanted to have 60% of the beds of hospitals to be vacant. So they sent home a lot of people with serious health conditions or chronic diseases, acute diseases, and it was a scandal. So we had almost 40,000 vacant beds for coronavirus patients, and we have a few hundred patients at the same time. So that was what I called overreaction. And the other story is the wages in the healthcare system. Nurses especially, but doctors also are very underpaid, and the opposition parties request 100% raise for them, but the only thing what will happen is a one-time extra money of 100 euros net. What they get, yeah.
Mm. Did you have the feeling that these problems have had some impact on the public discussions? So do people start to pay more attention to this problem than before?
When we see the problem maps, in mental maps in people's mind, the healthcare was always in top 3, or usually the number 1, and it will remain this way. But interestingly, also those people who support the government or governing parties see that the state of the healthcare system is terrible, and still they give their vote to Fidesz, which is, well, yeah, we have a lot of things to do with that.
Mm. Well, I want to thank both of you. Our time is up. I felt this was very interesting discussion. I learned many new aspects also. I think we've also seen what is similar, what is different between the two countries. We've learned that the virus has not overthrown any of the regimes in Poland and Hungary. It will be interesting how this develops further. I want to thank everybody who has joined us, who has followed the discussion. We will keep organizing the basic income tea sessions also in the next weeks. Next Sunday, our topic is the future of work. So the question, how do we look at social useful activities, social useful work versus paid employment? What is our understanding of work? How has the entire pandemic situation influenced this? So I hope you are going to tune in again. I wish you all a very nice Sunday evening. Thanks, Marta. Thanks, Spencer. Thanks, everyone. And goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.